All right, everybody. So today we're discussing Gaza. Let's get right into it. Hey, everybody. Okay, so this book is probably the highlight of my entire month so far. It was the second book that I read here in January. It's called Gaza, An Inquest Into Its Martyrdom. It was written by Norman Finkelstein, who is just an incredible author, great scholar, great thinker. I just can't say enough good about this guy. And I would say of many intellectuals out there, I have to say he's got to be up there as one of the most unimpeachable people I've ever seen and listened to. And trust me, that's a pretty rare endorsement. I'm sure he's got his frailties and his problems. There are even differences that I've noticed in his point of view and my own. But as for moral integrity and commitment to telling the truth over dealing in ideology, I don't think that you can find any better in this regard. This was published a few years ago, 2018. He generally focuses on the various operations that have been carried out by Israel against Palestine, well, Gaza specifically, obviously, and he talks mainly about I would say the most amount of time he spends is on cast lead. He speaks a little bit on Pillar of Defense in 2012. And then he spends a lot more time on Protective Edge. And he also focuses in on the flotilla that originated from Turkey, I believe, of the Mavi Marmara, I think was what it was called. This was shortly after Cast Lead, if I'm not mistaken. And the brutal and just psychotic reaction to, a perfectly reasonable and actually laudable humanitarian effort on the part of the Turks. So his documentation in here is par excellence. He says in the introduction that it requires patience, and I would agree with him on that. I mean, we've got endnotes in here that are at least half the page and sometimes just about the whole page. And this is, of course, to say nothing of the appendix, which deals on the illegality of Israel's occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, and sort of gives some background on specifically what precedents could be invoked with Namibia, South Africa's involvement with Namibia. The book is, I'd say roughly 410 pages. It's not an easy read. I'm right at home with this book, particularly because I've done so much reading on what the Palestinians have been through, and actually just this whole conflict overall between Israel. I have an interest in books like, for example, 12 Tribes just came out by Ethan McKelly, I think was his name. Hopefully I'm saying the name right. And that was a very Israeli-centric book. It does, of course, bring up certain injustices with the Palestinians, but that's certainly not the focus of the book. And so, of course, I'm interested on both sides of this argument, but I can't deny that in terms of the facts, they're on the side of the Palestinians. There is an aggressor here, and there is an oppressed indigenous group, and it is a colonial project, although there are distinctions to be made between, the colonial enterprise of, the great imperial regimes like France and Germany and Britain, of course, and even neo-colonial project under the American experiment, where you don't need to necessarily set up colonies, you just send your corporations, and you can do all the same evils, but get away with it as it not being an official conquest. You know what I mean? I was really impressed with, as I said, the scholarship of this book. It's especially relevant now, given what Gaza is going through, this has been the worst flare-up since, I believe, the Intifada years back in the 80s, or perhaps even a little earlier. Where you're getting casualties. I think the last casualties that kind of came up this high was in Lebanon through the Intifada years, where you had, not just a few thousand, just not where you had a few thousand, but we're talking in the tens of thousands of casualties, virtually innumerable, injuries and amputations without anesthetics and the whole nine yards. I mean, Israel is a terrifying force on this world stage. In terms of features, it has some great illustrations here and some really damning charts. Speaks a little bit about how Gaza has been abandoned by institutions that have been denounced by Israel as being, really anti-Semitic against them. And Norman Finkelstein is pointing out, like, for example, in the case of Amnesty International and their documentation of the 2014 Operation Protective Edge, he says that it was if anything, it was flattering towards Israel. He speaks of the Goldstone report and the transparent reversal, where it was so thoroughgoing, and this was written by a Zionist, for heaven's sakes. But he was just, being honest about what he saw and what he studied. And then, obviously, based on the surrounding evidence, there's no other way you can conclude that he was pressured into rescinding it. Rescinding what part exactly? He never said. How do you reverse the entire, all of the claims that were made in the Goldstone report? And then you stack it up against the pressures that were on this guy. It doesn't take a brilliant prosecutor to draw the connections there, that obviously there was some gagging going on. There was a gag put on him. As for the scope of the work, I would say it's a little tighter than others. It's, definitely focusing on modern times. Of course, he does bring up the basic elements to this conflict, with the Sykes-Picot Agreement coming out of World War I, or I guess just before World War I was concluded, and how the Ottoman Empire was partitioned, and then leading to the British Mandate, of course, the following year, and then Israel announcing statehood in 1948, and then the main sort of battles that have been fought, like the Six-Day War in 1967, and then the Yom Kippur in 1973, and then leading into the Intifadas. And, he covers all of that. But his main focus is, I would say, from 2006, where you had the elections that were overseen by many election watch groups, but most notably, to him at least, and in fact, this even brings up a little bit of a difference that him and I have on this. He would say that election was done based on Jimmy Carter's endorsement. It was perfectly fair and open. And yet there's been many people who have said otherwise, even people with far less honorable characters than Jimmy Carter. I'm thinking specifically of people like Ban Ki-moon, who has his own issues, but he said that they were, and he was very slow to many parts of these terrible flare-ups in condemning them and getting aid and all the rest of it. But even he said, and cites many people in his memoir, that that election wasn't fair. And besides, it was we're talking 17 years ago or something. Like, it's you can't hold these people responsible indefinitely for voting in Hamas, even though there is a perfectly sound argument to be made that Hamas, although there's been many terrible war crimes that have happened, rapes, taking of civilian lives, things like that, you can level all of that at Hamas. But this happens within a framework of Israel's, illegal occupation. And so that still falls on the guilt side of Israel, not entirely on the guilt side of Hamas, and certainly not collectively the guilt of Palestinians. He argues that really well. Although there are differences of opinion, I don't know exactly where to come out on this. When I've got Ban Ki-moon on the one side saying that the election of Hamas was, hardly democratic, and then you've got the endorsement of former President Jimmy Carter saying that it was perfectly open and fair, as elections go. I don't know how to come out on that. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because it was all those years ago, and the population of Gaza is over half is under 18, so it's irrelevant. But there's room for differences, right? Anyway, I don't want to wreck the book for you. I've given you sort of an idea of all the high points that he focuses on, what his main arguments are. If I tell you any more, you might as well not read the book. So we'll leave some interest there. But I'm telling you, this will probably be the best read of, for me, probably in the past 4 months. I would say I haven't read anything quite as compelling as this, so I would highly recommend it. Of course, it's becoming a little bit outdated because it's 2018, but it gives you a tremendous amount of context for the modern situation in Gaza in particular, but with the illegal occupation overall. Tell me what you think of that. Have you read this book? I certainly want to hear your thoughts if you have read it. And if you intend to read it, I want to know, if you maybe have some questions for me in the comments. We'll see you down there, okay? Thanks for stopping by. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.